The British royal family has faced countless scandals, controversies, and power struggles throughout history, but few moments have the potential to shake its very foundation like this one. Behind the grandeur of palaces, the meticulously crafted public appearances, and the carefully managed press statements, there lies a growing storm. One that threatens not only the future of the monarchy but also the personal lives of two of its most prominent figures. At the heart of this brewing crisis is an ultimatum, one that could determine the fate of a marriage, a brotherhood, and a dynasty. For years, Prince William and Prince Harry were seen as the unbreakable duo, two brothers who had survived the tragedy of losing their mother, Princess Diana, at an early age. They navigated the challenges of royal life together, often leaning on one another in times of difficulty. The world watched them grow from grieving boys into strong, confident men, seemingly ready to take on the responsibilities of their birthright. But as the years passed, tensions emerged, tensions that the public initially brushed aside as mere sibling rivalry. However, what began as subtle differences in opinion slowly escalated into a full-blown estrangement, and today, their relationship stands at the edge of an abyss. The feud between Prince William and Prince Harry is no longer just a matter of palace gossip or tabloid speculation. It has become one of the most defining conflicts in modern royal history. What makes this divide even more shocking is the impact it has had not just on the monarchy but on those closest to them. And now, in a move that no one saw coming, Catherine, the Princess of Wales, has taken an unprecedented step. According to sources close to the royal family, she has issued her husband, Prince William, an ultimatum: reconcile with Prince Harry or risk losing their marriage. This revelation has sent shockwaves through royal circles. Catherine has always been seen as the embodiment of grace, duty, and unwavering support for the monarchy. She has maintained her composure through years of scrutiny, silently enduring the pressures that come with being the future queen. Unlike Meghan Markle, whose tumultuous relationship with the royal family has been the subject of endless headlines, Catherine has largely remained in the background, embodying the role of the perfect royal wife. She has never been one to make public demands or to involve herself in controversies. Yet, something has changed. Something has pushed her to the breaking point. What led to this moment? Why would Catherine, who has been by William's side for over a decade, suddenly take such a bold and unprecedented stance? To understand this, we must look deeper into the cracks that have been forming beneath the surface for years. The tension between William and Harry did not begin overnight. It was not a single event that caused this rift, but rather a series of incidents that accumulated over time, each one deepening the divide. At the core of this fracture is a deep sense of betrayal. On one side, Prince William, who has spent his entire life being groomed to one day be king, believes in the sanctity of duty. He was raised to put the monarchy above all else, to see himself as a servant of the institution rather than an individual with personal desires. On the other side, Prince Harry, shaped by the same loss but with a very different outlook, has chosen a different path, one of independence, defiance, and self-preservation. Their differing approaches to royal life were bound to create conflict, but the real damage came when their personal grievances spilled into the public eye. The fallout from Harry and Meghan's infamous Oprah interview marked a turning point in their relationship. For the first time, the world saw just how deep the cracks ran within the royal family. Harry did not hold back as he spoke about the pressures of palace life, the struggles his wife endured, and his belief that his own family had abandoned him in his time of need. But what hurt Prince William the most was not just the accusations. It was the implication that he, too, was complicit in the suffering. William, who had always been protective of the monarchy, saw his brother's decision to air their dirty laundry as an unforgivable act of betrayal. This moment was followed by a series of public blows, from Harry's memoir, where he openly detailed private family disputes, to his Netflix documentary, which further strained an already fragile relationship. Prince William, known for his restraint and sense of duty, had largely chosen to remain silent, refusing to engage in the public war of words. But behind closed doors, the damage was undeniable. His relationship with his brother had reached a point where reconciliation seemed almost impossible. Catherine, however, saw things differently. She had always played the role of peacemaker, quietly urging her husband to find a way to mend things with his brother. She had witnessed firsthand the emotional toll this feud was taking on both of them, and more importantly, on the family unit they were supposed to protect. But with each passing year, the divide only grew wider, and the pressure within Kensington Palace became unbearable. What was it that finally made her issue the ultimatum? Some sources suggest that Catherine's breaking point came after a private family event, where tensions between William and Harry reached an all-time high. Others believe it was the realization that their children, Prince George, Princess Charlotte, and Prince Louis, were growing up in an environment where family conflict had become the norm. Whatever the reason, one thing is clear. Catherine was no longer willing to stand by in silence. For someone like Catherine, who has spent her entire royal career avoiding controversy, issuing such a stark ultimatum is not just uncharacteristic, it's seismic. This isn't simply about mending a broken relationship. It's about the future of the royal family itself. If Prince William refuses to reconcile with Harry, what does that mean for his marriage? Could the unthinkable happen? Could Catherine, one of the most beloved members of the royal family, actually walk away from her role as the future queen consort? As news of this ultimatum spreads, the public is divided. Some see Catherine's decision as an act of desperation, a last-ditch effort to salvage a relationship that may already be beyond repair. Others believe she is doing what no one else in the royal family has dared to do, forcing William to confront the emotional consequences of his actions. But one thing is certain. This moment will define the future of the monarchy in ways no one could have predicted. What happens next is a question that only time will answer. Will Prince William put aside his pride and extend an olive branch to his brother? Or will he stand firm in his belief that Harry's actions have made reconciliation impossible? And if he chooses the latter, what will Catherine do? Will she truly follow through on her ultimatum, or is this simply a desperate plea for change? The royal family has weathered countless storms, but this one feels different. This isn't just about a family feud or a marriage in crisis. This is about the very foundation upon which the monarchy stands: duty versus love, tradition versus change, loyalty versus betrayal. And as the world watches, one thing is clear. Whatever happens next will alter the course of history forever. From the outside, Prince William and Princess Catherine's marriage has often been portrayed as a near-perfect union, one that embodies stability, duty, and the unwavering commitment expected of the future king and queen. Their love story, which began in the early 2000s when they were university students, has been carefully cultivated into a modern-day fairy tale. The public has watched them grow together, face scrutiny, and emerge as the backbone of the royal family's future. However, the carefully curated image of harmony within their marriage does not necessarily reflect the full reality behind closed doors. Marriage, even under normal circumstances, is a complex institution. Add to that the weight of royal duty, the relentless media attention, and the immense pressure of being role models for an entire nation, and the strain becomes unimaginable. William and Catherine's relationship has had to endure challenges that most couples would never experience. Despite this, they have largely maintained an image of unity. But what happens when internal family conflicts threaten to unravel even the strongest of foundations? There have long been whispers of tension between William and Catherine. Small cracks in an otherwise impenetrable facade. Unlike other royal marriages that have played out messily in public, theirs has remained largely private, with both parties committed to maintaining their roles. Yet, in recent years, signs of stress have begun to surface, and those closest to them have taken notice. One of the most significant strains on their marriage has been the growing burden of responsibility. With Queen Elizabeth's passing, the shift in royal dynamics placed an even greater weight on William and Catherine's shoulders. As the Prince and Princess of Wales, they are now more central than ever to the monarchy's survival. William, who has always been deeply aware of his future role as king, has become increasingly preoccupied with upholding the dignity and stability of the crown. This has meant more public engagements, greater scrutiny, and a heightened sense of duty, all of which have affected his personal life. Catherine, while equally dedicated to royal service, has had to balance her public duties with the role of being a mother to their 3 children. She has long been praised for her ability to appear composed and graceful under pressure, but those close to her have reported that the ongoing feud between William and Harry has taken an emotional toll on her. For years, She has watched as her husband struggled with the loss of his once close relationship with his brother. She has seen the anger, the frustration, and the sadness that William rarely expresses in public. And despite her attempts to offer support, she has grown increasingly concerned about the long-term impact this rift is having not just on their family, but on their marriage itself. One of the biggest points of contention between William and Catherine has reportedly been their differing views on how to handle the situation with Harry. While William has taken a hardline stance, believing that his brother's actions have crossed an unforgivable line, Catherine has maintained a more diplomatic approach. She has always believed in the power of reconciliation and has encouraged her husband to consider the long-term consequences of cutting off his only sibling. But William, still feeling deeply betrayed, has refused to entertain the idea of extending an olive branch. This growing divide in their perspectives has led to heated discussions behind closed doors. Sources close to the royal household suggest that Catherine has grown increasingly frustrated with William's unwillingness to address the issue in a meaningful way. She has reportedly expressed concerns about how this ongoing tension is affecting their family dynamics, particularly their children. Prince George, the future king, is at an age where he is beginning to understand the complexities of his family's position. The absence of his uncle, someone who was once a significant figure in his early years, has not gone unnoticed. Catherine has also had to endure the additional pressure of public expectations. Unlike Meghan Markle, who has openly distanced herself from the royal family, Catherine is deeply embedded within the institution. She has always been seen as the stabilizing force within the monarchy, a role model who embodies tradition and grace. The idea that she would take a firm stand against her husband, let alone issue an ultimatum, seems almost unthinkable. And yet, after years of watching the situation deteriorate, she has reached her breaking point. The moment that led to Catherine's ultimatum was not a sudden, impulsive decision. It was the result of years of built-up frustration, emotional exhaustion, and a desire to protect the family she has worked so hard to build. She is not threatening to leave out of resentment or anger. Rather, she is making a desperate plea for change. She understands better than anyone the importance of family unity, and she fears that if something is not done now, the damage will become irreversible. What makes this situation even more complex is the fact that Catherine is not someone who issues threats lightly. Throughout her time in the royal family, she has been known for her quiet strength, her ability to endure challenges with grace, and her unwavering commitment to her role. For her to reach a point where she feels the need to force William into making a decision suggests that she sees no other way forward. This is not just about repairing a broken brotherhood. This is about preserving the very foundation of their marriage. The stakes could not be higher. If William refuses to reconcile with Harry, what does that mean for his relationship with Catherine? Would she truly follow through on her ultimatum? Or is this simply a desperate attempt to get her husband to see the bigger picture? The possibility of their marriage unraveling is something that no one, least of all William, would want to face. But at the same time, the wounds between him and Harry run deep, and forgiveness is not something that comes easily. For now, the world watches and waits. Will William choose his brother and attempt to mend the fractured relationship, or will he stand firm in his belief that Harry has gone too far? And if he does refuse to reconcile, will Catherine truly walk away? The answers to these questions could change the course of royal history in ways that no one could have predicted. This moment is not just about a personal dispute. It is about the future of the monarchy itself. The decisions made in the coming weeks and months will have lasting consequences, not just for William and Catherine, but for the institution they are destined to lead. The world has seen royal marriages crumble under pressure before, but this time, the stakes feel different. This is not just about duty versus personal relationships. This is about the survival of a family that has already lost too much. As the pressure mounts, one thing is certain. There is no easy way out. William must make a choice, and whatever he decides will shape the future of the royal family for generations to come. The fracture between Prince William and Prince Harry did not happen overnight. It was not the result of a single explosive argument or a dramatic betrayal. Instead, it was a slow, steady unraveling of a once unbreakable bond, a relationship that had been shaped by shared trauma, duty, and brotherly love. To the public, William and Harry were the faces of a modern, united monarchy, a new generation of royals who would lead with compassion and relatability. But behind the polished images and carefully crafted appearances, tension had been brewing for years. Their childhood had been marked by the devastating loss of their mother, Princess Diana. In the aftermath of her death, they clung to each other, bound by grief and an unspoken understanding of what it meant to live under the scrutiny of the public eye. The world had watched them walk together behind Diana's coffin, two boys forced into the harsh reality of their royal roles far too soon. In those moments, the brothers were more than just members of the monarchy. They were symbols of resilience, of a future that carried the memory of their mother forward. As they grew older, their bond remained strong, but the pressures of royal life began to shape them in different ways. William, as the heir, had always known the weight of his destiny. He was trained to prioritize duty above all else, to uphold the institution at any cost. His path was clear, rigidly defined by tradition, and he had little room to question it. Harry, on the other hand, was the spare, a title that came with privilege but also uncertainty. He was given more freedom, more room to carve his own identity, but with that came the question of purpose. What role did he truly have within the monarchy? For years, they navigated their differences with relative ease. William was the responsible one, the future king in training, while Harry was the more rebellious, carefree younger brother. Their dynamic worked, and they complemented each other. But as they entered adulthood, cracks began to form. William's commitment to his royal duties grew more intense, while Harry started to feel increasingly alienated from the rigid expectations placed upon him. Still, their bond remained intact, until Meghan Markle entered the picture. Harry's relationship with Meghan was, in many ways, a catalyst for the deeper issues that had been simmering beneath the surface. From the moment their romance became public, the media frenzy was relentless. Meghan was a stark departure from the traditional royal mold, an independent, biracial, American actress who had built a career outside the royal sphere. To Harry, she was everything he had ever wanted. Someone who understood his struggles, who was willing to step into his world despite the challenges. But to the royal family, and particularly to William, Meghan represented a disruption. William's initial concern about Meghan was not necessarily personal. It was about the speed of Harry's relationship. He had always been protective of his younger brother and felt that Harry was moving too fast. He urged him to take his time, to be sure that Meghan fully understood the sacrifices that came with royal life. But to Harry, this was not just advice. It was an insult. He saw it as yet another example of his family underestimating him, of assuming that he was incapable of making decisions for himself. The conversation reportedly turned tense, and for the first time, a real rift emerged between the brothers. As Harry and Meghan's relationship progressed, so did the growing divide. The British press was relentless in its scrutiny of Meghan, and Harry was furious at what he saw as a lack of support from his family. He believed that William and Catherine, who had been through their own share of media scrutiny, would stand by him and defend Meghan against the onslaught. But the palace remained largely silent, following the long-standing rule of ignoring negative press rather than engaging with it. This silence spoke volumes to Harry. He saw it as a betrayal, proof that his family was unwilling to protect him and his wife from the same kind of media harassment that had contributed to their mother's tragic fate. The tension reached a breaking point when Harry and Meghan announced their decision to step back from royal duties. It was a move that shocked the world and sent the monarchy into crisis. William, already struggling with the responsibilities of his future role, felt abandoned. Harry's departure was not just about stepping away from royal life. It was, in William's eyes, an act of defiance, a rejection of everything they had been raised to uphold. The public was quick to take sides. Some sympathized with Harry and Meghan, believing that they had been treated unfairly and had every right to seek a life of their own. Others saw their decision as selfish, a betrayal of the institution that had given them everything. And at the center of it all were two brothers who had once been inseparable but now barely spoke. The real damage came with Harry and Meghan's Oprah interview. When Harry openly discussed the fractures within his family, when he spoke of feeling trapped within the institution, when he revealed private conversations, this was the moment that changed everything. William, who had always maintained a dignified silence, was blindsided. The interview was not just an airing of grievances. It was an attack on the very foundation of the monarchy. The moment Harry uttered the words, "I love my brother dearly, but we're on different paths," it became clear that reconciliation was no longer just a matter of a simple conversation. It was a monumental challenge. In the years that followed, the relationship deteriorated further. Harry's memoir, which detailed his version of events, only deepened the wounds. He wrote about feeling like an outsider, about childhood rivalries that had never truly healed, about moments of cruelty and resentment. William, who had always kept their disagreements private, felt utterly betrayed. The book was the final blow, a confirmation that their relationship had reached a point of no return. But despite the bitterness, the anger, and the public spectacle, there remains a sliver of something deeper, something unspoken. Beneath the conflict is a history that cannot be erased, a childhood filled with shared memories, a bond that no amount of distance can fully sever. And it is this underlying connection that Catherine has clung to, believing that there is still a way back, that the brothers can find common ground once more. The question now is whether William is willing to take that step, whether he can set aside the years of resentment and betrayal to see the bigger picture. Because if he cannot, then Catherine's ultimatum may force him to make an even harder decision, one that could change the course of not just his marriage, but his entire future. For years, Catherine, Princess of Wales, had been the silent force behind Prince William. She had accepted the role of royal wife with grace, enduring the scrutiny, the pressures, and the weight of public expectation without complaint. Unlike others who had married into the royal family, she never showed signs of struggle publicly. She did not seek sympathy, did not rebel against the rigid structures of royal life, and did not waver in her support for her husband. But beneath that composed exterior, there was a woman who had been quietly dealing with her own battles. At first, Catherine tried to ignore the tension between William and Harry, hoping that with time, it would resolve itself. The brothers had argued before, they had gone through disagreements, but they had always found their way back to each other. She believed this was just another rough patch, something that would pass as the dust settled. But as the months turned into years and the divide only deepened, she began to realize that this was different. This was not just an argument between siblings. This was a full-blown rupture that threatened to become permanent. Catherine had always been an advocate for family unity. Coming from a close-knit family herself, she understood the importance of maintaining relationships despite disagreements. She had watched how Queen Elizabeth had kept the family together despite scandals, betrayals, and divisions, and she believed that William and Harry could do the same. But what she had not accounted for was just how deeply personal this rift had become for her husband. William's anger toward Harry was no longer just about royal duty or public perception. It had become something far more personal. He felt abandoned, betrayed, and humiliated by the very person who was supposed to stand by him. And the more Catherine saw this pain in her husband, the more she felt the burden of it herself. She watched as the tension weighed on him, as it hardened him, as it changed the man she had married. The hardest part was knowing that there was nothing she could do to fix it. She had tried, gently at first, suggesting that perhaps there was room for forgiveness, that maybe Harry did not fully understand the consequences of his actions. She had attempted to open discussions, to remind William of the bond they once had. But every time she brought up Harry's name, it was met with resistance. William had shut down any conversation about reconciliation, making it clear that he was not interested in revisiting the past. For Catherine, this was not just frustrating, it was heartbreaking. She had always believed in the strength of family, and now, she was watching it fall apart. What made it even more difficult was the fact that she had once been close to Harry herself. Before Meghan entered the picture, she and Harry had shared a strong bond. He had been the younger brother she had never had, someone who made her laugh, who supported her, who was there for her in the early years of her marriage when the pressures of royal life felt overwhelming. She missed that version of Harry, the one who was playful, kind, and fiercely loyal to his brother, the one who had once spoken about how much he admired her and how he was grateful to have her in his life. But that Harry no longer existed, not in the way she remembered. Now, there was only distance, bitterness, and a growing sense of finality. As the months passed, Catherine's frustration began to shift into something more serious: concern. She was not just worried about the future of the monarchy. She was worried about the future of her own family. She saw how the feud was affecting William emotionally, how it was impacting their home life. He had always been devoted to his role as a husband and father, but lately, she had noticed a change. He was more withdrawn, more focused on work, more determined to bury himself in royal duties as a way to escape the emotional turmoil. She had tried to talk to him about it, but he always deflected, insisting that everything was fine. But Catherine knew better. She could see it in the way he carried himself, in the way he avoided conversations about anything personal. The weight of his emotions was suffocating him, and he was refusing to acknowledge it. And the longer this went on, the more Catherine began to wonder if this feud was doing more damage to their marriage than either of them realized. The turning point came when their children started asking questions. Prince George, the eldest, had begun to notice that his Uncle Harry was no longer around. He had asked why he didn't see him anymore, why he didn't come to visit like he used to. Catherine had struggled with how to answer, knowing that whatever she said would shape George's understanding of family. She had tried to keep it simple, telling him that sometimes adults have disagreements, but that family always finds a way back to each other. But even as she said the words, she wasn't sure if she believed them anymore. That was when she realized that something needed to change. She could not continue pretending that this feud had no effect on their family. She could not sit back and watch as William carried this burden alone, refusing to confront it. And she certainly could not allow this to become a permanent scar that their children would one day inherit. If there was any chance of reconciliation, she had to push for it. She had to make William see that this was bigger than his pride, bigger than his anger. It was then that she made the decision that shocked everyone, including William. She issued the ultimatum. It was not an easy choice. She knew that this would put her in a position she had never been in before, directly opposing her husband on something he felt strongly about. But she also knew that this was necessary. This was about more than just William and Harry. This was about the long-term future of their family. If they continued down this path of resentment and silence, the damage would become irreversible. And she was not willing to let that happen. She had never seen William react the way he did when she finally confronted him. At first, he was dismissive, as he always was whenever she brought up Harry. But when she made it clear that this was not just another discussion, that she was serious about the consequences, the atmosphere in the room changed. He looked at her, stunned, as if he could not believe what he was hearing. And then, for the first time in a long time, he really listened. Catherine told him everything. She told him how much it hurt her to see him carry this anger. She told him how their children were beginning to notice the absence of their uncle. She told him how much she missed the man he used to be before this feud consumed him. And then, she told him the hardest truth of all, that if he refused to even try to mend things with his brother, she was not sure how much longer she could continue living in the middle of a war that never seemed to end. She did not say it out of anger or out of an attempt to manipulate him. She said it because she needed him to understand just how much this was affecting their family. She needed him to see that this was not just about him and Harry anymore. This was about all of them. For the first time in a long time, William had nothing to say. He just sat there, silent, absorbing the weight of her words. And Catherine knew that in that moment, something had shifted. Whether it was enough to bring about reconciliation remained to be seen. But for the first time, she felt that he was truly listening. The question now was whether he would act on it. The atmosphere in Kensington Palace had changed. What was once a home filled with the warmth of a growing family now carried an unspoken tension. The silence between Prince William and Catherine was louder than any argument they had ever had. It had been days since she had given him the ultimatum, and he had yet to offer her an answer. He avoided the conversation, burying himself in royal engagements, late-night meetings, and an endless stream of responsibilities. But Catherine knew that avoidance would not solve this problem. The breaking point was coming, and there was no way to stop it. For years, they had been the image of stability within the monarchy, the couple who could do no wrong. Unlike the tumultuous marriages of previous generations, Charles and Diana, Andrew and Sarah, even Harry and Meghan, William and Catherine had presented an unshakable partnership. They had faced public scrutiny together, endured the pressures of royal life, and raised their children with a sense of normalcy that was almost unheard of for future heirs. But now, that foundation was being tested in ways Catherine had never imagined. The walls of the palace, once a sanctuary, had become a prison of unresolved emotions. The servants noticed it too, their footsteps quieter, their presence more careful. No one dared to bring up the subject that hung in the air. No one spoke of Harry or of Catherine's ultimatum. But the absence of words did nothing to erase the weight of the situation. Catherine's breaking point had not come suddenly. It had been building for years, a slow accumulation of frustration, sadness, and helplessness. She had watched her husband withdraw from the warmth that once defined their marriage. She had watched him bury his emotions, refusing to acknowledge the pain that was tearing him apart. And she had watched as the rift between him and his brother became something so vast that it threatened to consume them all. She had hoped that time would heal the wounds, that distance would allow for perspective. But time had only solidified the walls between them. And now, she was forced to make a decision she never thought she would have to make. The breaking point finally arrived on a cold evening, in the quiet of their private sitting room. The children were asleep, the palace was still, and Catherine knew that this was the moment. She could no longer let the silence stretch between them. She could no longer pretend that this was something that would simply resolve itself. She found William standing by the window, his posture tense, his gaze distant. He knew why she was there. He had been expecting this conversation, yet he still wasn't ready for it. "We can't keep avoiding this," Catherine said softly, her voice steady despite the storm raging inside her. William did not turn to face her immediately. He exhaled sharply, his shoulders rising and falling with the weight of emotions he refused to show. "I don't know what you want me to say," he finally muttered. Catherine stepped closer, her hands trembling at her sides. "I want you to tell me if you're willing to fix this, if you're willing to try. Because if you're not, then I need to know." William turned then, his blue eyes filled with a mixture of exhaustion and something deeper, something Catherine could not quite place. "Do you really think it's that simple?" he asked, his voice low, controlled. "Do you really think I can just call Harry, pretend like everything he's done doesn't matter, and move on?" Catherine shook her head. "No, I don't think it's simple. I know it's not. But I also know that holding on to this anger is destroying you. It's destroying us." William clenched his jaw, his hands tightening into fists at his sides. "He betrayed me, Catherine. He betrayed this family. He didn't just leave. He burned every bridge on his way out. And now you're asking me to forget that?" "I'm asking you to stop letting it define you," she corrected. "I'm asking you to think about what this is doing to us, to our children. George is already asking questions. Charlotte and Louis will too, in time. Do you really want them to grow up believing that their father and their uncle are enemies?" William's expression hardened. "I don't want them growing up thinking that betrayal is something you just forgive." Catherine swallowed the lump in her throat. She had expected resistance, but this was deeper than she had realized. William was not just hurt. He was broken, and he had no idea how to put himself back together. She stepped forward, closing the distance between them. "William, I love you. I always have. But I can't keep watching you let this destroy you. I can't keep living in a home where every mention of your brother is met with anger and silence. I need to know if there's a future for us where this doesn't consume everything." He looked at her then, really looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something shift in his eyes. Fear. Not fear of losing Harry, but fear of losing her. "You're serious," he whispered. "I am," she confirmed, her voice unwavering. "I don't want to leave. But if this doesn't change, I don't know how much longer I can do this." William ran a hand through his hair, his frustration evident. "And if I try to reach out, and he doesn't want to fix things? What then?" Catherine hesitated. She knew that was a possibility. She knew that Harry might not be ready, that Meghan's influence might make reconciliation impossible. But that wasn't the point. "Then at least you'll know you tried," she said. "At least you'll know you didn't let pride and anger make that decision for you." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words, unshed tears, and the weight of years of unresolved conflict. Finally, William exhaled, shaking his head. I don't know if I can do this. Catherine reached for his hand, gripping it tightly. You can. And you won't be doing it alone. For the first time in years, William allowed himself to lower his defenses. He let her in, just a little. And in that moment, for the first time, Catherine saw a glimmer of hope. It was not a resolution. It was not a guarantee. But it was a start. And for now, that was enough. Understood. I will now proceed with the next section and ensure it meets the required word count while maintaining a compelling narrative. Catherine's words had hung in the air for days, a ghost that refused to leave the walls of their home. William had heard them, processed them, turned them over in his mind more times than he cared to admit. Yet, he had not responded. He was a man who had spent his life mastering the art of control, controlling his emotions, his public image, his duty to the crown. He had been trained to suppress, to endure, to push forward no matter the personal cost. But this was different. This was personal in a way that no amount of royal training had prepared him for. Catherine had never given him an ultimatum before. She had always been patient, understanding, and steadfast in her support. She had stood beside him through every challenge, never once wavering. So, for her to reach this breaking point, for her to say what she said, William knew she had been pushed to her limit. The words were not spoken in anger. They were not a threat made in the heat of an argument. They had been carefully chosen, delivered with quiet but unshakable conviction. And that was what made them so powerful. You need to fix this, William. Not for them, not for the public, but for us. For our family. For our children. I cannot stand by and watch this anger consume you any longer. If you refuse to even try, if you refuse to acknowledge what this is doing to you, then I don't know how much longer I can stay. The words had cut through him like a blade. The idea of losing Catherine was something he had never truly considered before. She had always been there, his partner, his greatest source of stability. But now, for the first time, he realized that his anger, his pride, his unwillingness to let go of his resentment toward Harry had consequences beyond what he had been willing to see. Catherine had given him a choice. She was not demanding that he forgive Harry overnight. She was not asking him to forget the years of betrayal he felt. What she was asking for was an attempt to move forward, an attempt to put the past behind them, an attempt to be the man she knew he could be. She was asking him to make a decision, not out of duty, not out of obligation, but out of love. William had spent his entire life preparing for the throne, but in this moment, he felt completely lost. He had faced political crises, national tragedies, and the weight of the monarchy's survival. Yet, the thought of picking up the phone and calling his brother felt like the hardest thing he had ever been asked to do. But Catherine had forced him to confront the truth. This feud was not just about Harry anymore. It was about what kind of husband he wanted to be, what kind of father he wanted to be, what kind of future he wanted for his children. If he continued down this path, if he allowed his anger to dictate his choices, what lesson was he teaching them? That family bonds were disposable? That pride was more important than reconciliation? That grudges were meant to last a lifetime? These were the questions that haunted him in the days following Catherine's ultimatum. For Catherine, the waiting was unbearable. She knew William was struggling with the weight of her words, but she also knew that she could not back down. If she allowed this to continue, if she let him retreat into his silence again, then she would have been complicit in the slow erosion of their marriage. So, one evening, as the tension between them became almost suffocating, she made the decision to confront him again. "You still haven't answered me," she said quietly, standing in the doorway of their bedroom as he sat on the edge of the bed, lost in thought. William ran a hand through his hair, exhaling sharply. "I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to tell me what you're going to do," she said firmly. "Because this isn't something that's going to go away on its own." He looked up at her then, his eyes filled with exhaustion. "And if I say I can't do it? If I say I can't forgive him?" Catherine swallowed, her heart tightening at the question. "Then I need to know that you've at least tried. That you're not just shutting him out because it's easier than facing the past." William sighed, shaking his head. You don't understand. Then help me understand, she pressed. Help me understand why you'd rather let this destroy us than take the risk of trying to fix it. He was silent for a long moment before finally speaking. Because I don't know if I have it in me, he admitted. Because if I open that door, I don't know if I can control what comes next. What if he rejects me? What if he doesn't care? What if I reach out and he throws it back in my face? Catherine stepped forward, her voice softer now. And what if he doesn't? What if he's waiting for you to make the first move? What if all it takes is one conversation to start undoing the damage? William let out a bitter laugh. And what if it makes things worse? Catherine knelt in front of him, taking his hands in hers. Then at least you'll know you tried. At least you won't have to live with the regret of wondering what could have been. William closed his eyes, his grip tightening around hers. For so long, he had believed that shutting Harry out was the only way to protect himself. But now, faced with the possibility of losing the woman he loved, he began to wonder if that belief had been a mistake. Catherine had given him an ultimatum, not out of cruelty, not out of anger, but out of love. And now, the choice was his. Did he continue down the path of resentment, or did he take the first step toward healing? The answer, he realized, would determine not just the future of his relationship with his brother, but the future of his marriage, his family, and his own peace of mind. And for the first time, he found himself considering what reconciliation might actually look like. The moment news of Catherine's ultimatum reached the public, it sent shockwaves through royal circles and beyond. The idea that the Princess of Wales, known for her grace and unwavering support of the monarchy, had reached such a breaking point was almost unthinkable. Yet, behind the grandeur of royal palaces and carefully curated public appearances, a storm was brewing. One that had the potential to reshape the monarchy's future. Royal experts, historians, and those with deep knowledge of the institution wasted no time in dissecting what this ultimatum meant, not only for William and Catherine's marriage but for the monarchy itself. Could a relationship that had seemed unshakable now be at risk? And if so, what did that mean for the future of the royal family? One of the first voices to weigh in was a veteran royal commentator who had followed William and Catherine's journey since their early courtship. According to him, the strength of their marriage had always been rooted in their shared sense of duty and deep personal connection. However, the pressures surrounding them, particularly William's feud with Harry, had created an emotional strain that was difficult to ignore. This isn't just a disagreement between brothers, he explained in an exclusive interview. This is a conflict that has spilled over into every aspect of William's life. And now, it's affecting his marriage in a way that no one could have predicted. Other royal analysts pointed out that Catherine's move was unprecedented. While past royal wives had struggled with various issues behind palace walls, few had taken such a direct stand. Queen Elizabeth had endured her husband's rumored indiscretions in silence. Princess Diana had eventually spoken out, but had been vilified for doing so. And Meghan Markle, when faced with what she perceived as hostility within the institution, had chosen to leave entirely. But Catherine? She had done something entirely different. She had put her own marriage on the line, not for personal gain, not for rebellion, but in a desperate attempt to bring healing to a family that was falling apart. A longtime royal biographer offered another perspective, emphasizing the role that external pressures played in the growing strain between William and Catherine. People forget that William is not just a husband and father. He is a man preparing to take on the most demanding role in Britain. Every decision he makes is viewed through the lens of his future kingship. He is under immense pressure to be strong, to be unwavering. But in trying to be that, he may be losing sight of the personal relationships that truly matter. One particularly striking analysis came from a historian who specialized in royal marriages throughout history. She compared William and Catherine's situation to that of King George VI and Queen Elizabeth, the Queen Mother. George VI was never meant to be king, much like William never expected to take on so much responsibility so soon. His reign was defined by war, duty, and a sense of obligation that often came at the expense of his personal relationships. Catherine is very much like Queen Elizabeth, the quiet force behind the throne. But even the strongest of queens need support. If William does not address this issue, He risks isolating himself in the same way past monarchs have. Public reaction to Catherine's ultimatum was divided. Supporters praised her for taking a stand, for refusing to let royal duty dictate the emotional health of her family. Others, however, questioned whether it was appropriate for her to issue such a demand. Marriage is about compromise, one critic noted. But is it fair to force William into reconciling with a brother who has done nothing but attack him publicly? Psychologists who specialize in family estrangement weighed in as well, explaining that long-standing conflicts between siblings often take years, even decades, to heal, if they ever do at all. One expert noted, the issue here isn't just about reconciliation. It's about trust. William feels betrayed. Catherine, as an outsider to that relationship, sees things more objectively. She sees the bigger picture. But William? He sees wounds that haven't healed. Among those weighing in, perhaps the most significant voices were those closest to the palace, anonymous sources who had witnessed firsthand how this situation had unfolded behind the scenes. One such insider revealed that Catherine had been quietly pushing for reconciliation long before issuing her ultimatum. This isn't new for her. She's always believed that family should come before anything else. But she's also seen what this is doing to William. And that's why she had to say something. Another source suggested that while Catherine's decision had shocked the royal household, there were those who understood why she had done it. Many in the palace agree with her, even if they won't say it out loud. They've seen what this feud has done to William. They've seen the stress, the emotional toll. And they know that if something doesn't change soon, it's going to start affecting his ability to lead. But what happens next? That was the question on everyone's mind. Could the marriage survive this test? Would William choose to heed Catherine's plea, or would he see it as an unfair demand? And if he did not act, would Catherine truly follow through on her ultimatum? Experts remain cautious in their predictions. Some believe that Catherine's deep love for her husband would keep her by his side, no matter the outcome. Others speculated that if William refused to make any attempt to reconcile with Harry, it could lead to a long-term strain that neither of them could ignore. One particularly blunt analyst summed it up best, at the end of the day, this isn't just about Harry. This is about William and Catherine's marriage. This is about whether they can weather this storm together, or whether the rift between William and Harry becomes the rift between William and Catherine. And so, the world waited. Would William be willing to put aside his pride for the sake of his marriage? Or was this feud destined to cost him more than just his brother? Only time would tell. The moment Catherine's ultimatum became public knowledge, the reactions were swift and polarizing. Across social media platforms, television debates, and online forums, the public took sides in what was quickly becoming one of the most talked about royal controversies in recent history. Was Catherine right to take such a drastic stand? Or had she overstepped, forcing William into an impossible situation? The divide was clear. On one side were those who believed Catherine was doing what no one else in the royal family had dared to do, holding William accountable for his emotional well-being. These supporters saw her as a strong and modern royal, someone who understood that being a future king did not mean sacrificing personal relationships. They praised her for recognizing the toll this feud had taken on her husband and her family. Many women, in particular, resonated with her decision, seeing it as an act of love rather than manipulation. She's not doing this for herself, one supporter posted on social media. She's doing this because she sees what this feud is doing to William. Sometimes, the people we love need a push in the right direction. Others echoed the sentiment, pointing out that Catherine had spent years standing by William's side without complaint. If she had reached a point where she felt the need to issue an ultimatum, then it was a sign that things had gone too far. Some even compared her to the late Princess Diana, drawing parallels between the strength both women had shown in standing up for their families. Princess Diana wanted nothing more than for her sons to stay close, one royal enthusiast noted. Catherine is fighting for the same thing. She's doing what Diana would have wanted. But not everyone saw Catherine's decision in such a favorable light. Critics accused her of interfering in a situation that was not hers to fix. To them, William's estrangement from Harry was a deeply personal matter, one that should not be influenced by outside pressure, even from his own wife. They argued that forcing a reconciliation would only make matters worse, and that Catherine had put William in an unfair position. You can't force someone to forgive, one critic tweeted. William has every right to be angry with Harry. It's not Catherine's place to tell him how to feel. Others questioned whether Catherine truly understood the depth of William's hurt. To them, it was easy for her to call for reconciliation because she had not been the one directly betrayed. William had been the target of Harry's accusations, the one left to pick up the pieces after his brother's departure. Critics argued that she was looking at the situation through an idealistic lens rather than acknowledging the reality of the damage that had been done. Some also pointed out that Catherine and Meghan had never truly been close, and that their strained relationship might be a factor in her decision. Did she want William and Harry to reconcile, or did she want to prove that she could be the peacemaker where Meghan had failed? It was a question that some skeptics could not ignore. Beyond the division on social media, public figures and commentators also weighed in. Prominent talk show hosts debated the issue, with some siding with Catherine and others questioning whether her actions had gone too far. Psychological experts were invited to share their opinions, offering insights into the complexities of sibling rivalry and family estrangement. One psychologist explained that long-standing feuds, particularly those involving deep feelings of betrayal, were incredibly difficult to mend. Reconciliation is not something that happens overnight, she said in a televised interview. It requires both parties to be willing. If William is not emotionally ready to forgive, then forcing the issue could do more harm than good. Another expert, however, argued that Catherine's approach was not as unreasonable as some were making it out to be. What she is doing is setting a boundary, he explained. She is telling William that this anger is affecting their family dynamic and that she cannot continue to live in an environment where it dominates their lives. That's not manipulation, it's honesty. Beyond the online discourse, the media frenzy surrounding the story was relentless. Tabloid headlines ranged from supportive to outright critical. Some publications painted Catherine as a strong, modern royal who was standing up for family unity, while others accused her of playing a dangerous game by involving herself in a matter that had little to do with her. Kate's bold stand, a wife's desperate plea to save her husband, read one sympathetic headline. Catherine's ultimatum. Has the future queen gone too far? Countered another. The discussions extended beyond the UK, with international media covering the story with just as much intensity. In the United States, where Harry and Meghan had built their new life, reactions were mixed. Some American audiences, particularly those who supported the Sussexes, saw the ultimatum as a sign that the royal family was still unwilling to fully acknowledge Harry's grievances. To them, this was just another example of the institution prioritizing its image over the genuine emotional struggles of its members. But within the UK, where support for the monarchy remained strong, the conversation was more focused on whether William could, or should, make peace with his brother. Many royalists believed that Catherine's push for reconciliation was not just about their marriage, but about the stability of the royal family itself. They worried that if William and Harry remained divided, it would create an irreparable fracture in the monarchy that could last for generations. The Queen always believed in family above all else, one royal commentator noted. If she were here today, she would be urging them to reconcile. Catherine is simply doing what needs to be done. The royal family itself remained silent on the matter. Buckingham Palace, true to its long-standing policy, refused to comment on private family matters. But behind the scenes, insiders reported that there was growing concern within the palace about the impact this was having on William's public image. If he chose not to act, would he be seen as stubborn and unforgiving? If he did attempt reconciliation and failed, would it only worsen the situation? Meanwhile, Harry and Meghan had yet to respond publicly. Some speculated that Harry, who had made it clear in past interviews that he had no regrets about his decision to leave, would not be interested in William's attempts at reconciliation. Others believed that, deep down, he might still long for a relationship with his brother but was unsure of how to bridge the gap. As the debate raged on, one thing was clear. Catherine's ultimatum had changed the conversation. What had once been a private feud between two brothers was now a national discussion, with millions of people invested in the outcome. Whether one supported Catherine's decision or not, there was no denying that she had forced the issue into the spotlight. And now, the world waited to see what William would do. Would he heed his wife's plea and attempt to mend the relationship with Harry? Or would his resentment prove too great to overcome? One way or another, a decision had to be made. As the controversy surrounding Catherine's ultimatum continued to dominate headlines, attention inevitably turned to the broader implications for the monarchy itself. King Charles III, still in the early years of his reign, now found himself at the center of yet another family crisis. The royal family had endured countless scandals over the years, but the rift between his two sons had become an open wound that refused to heal. And now, with Catherine's ultimatum forcing the issue to the forefront, the pressure on the king to intervene had never been greater. For years, Charles had largely remained silent on the feud between William and Harry. Unlike Queen Elizabeth, who had been a master at managing internal family conflicts while maintaining a public air of neutrality, Charles had taken a more hands-off approach. Some believe this was because he did not want to alienate either son. Others speculated that he simply did not know how to fix something that had spiraled so far out of control. Now, however, he could no longer afford to ignore it. With Catherine making it clear that the division was affecting not just William but the future of their family, Charles was faced with a difficult decision. Did he step in and attempt to mediate, knowing that his intervention could either help or further inflame the situation? Or did he continue to let his sons handle it themselves, hoping that time would eventually bring them back together? The problem was that time had not healed the wounds. If anything, it had deepened them. Harry's decision to leave royal life had been painful enough, but his subsequent actions, revealing private conversations and interviews, publishing a memoir that laid bare years of royal tensions, and aligning himself with those who openly criticized the monarchy, had created a level of distrust that seemed insurmountable. William, ever the dutiful heir, had absorbed much of this as a personal betrayal, while Charles had struggled with the knowledge that the monarchy itself was suffering under the weight of such public division. For a king whose reign had already been met with challenges, from public skepticism to political uncertainty, this family crisis was yet another test of his ability to lead. The monarchy thrived on unity. It depended on the image of a strong, cohesive family. But with William and Harry's feud becoming one of the most publicized conflicts in royal history, that image was starting to crack. Advisors within the palace were divided on how Charles should handle the situation. Some believed that the best course of action was to remain neutral, allowing William and Harry to sort out their differences without interference. They argued that any direct involvement from the king could be seen as favoritism and risk further alienating one son or the other. Others, however, believed that a firm hand was needed. They pointed out that Queen Elizabeth had, in her own quiet way, ensured that even the most difficult family disputes were managed behind closed doors, away from public scrutiny. If Charles did not act soon, he risked allowing this conflict to define his reign. Behind closed doors, sources suggested that Charles was deeply troubled by the situation. He had never been a particularly emotional father. Duty had always come first. But in recent years, as he settled into his role as king, he had shown a more reflective side. He had publicly expressed his love for both of his sons, despite everything that had happened. But love alone was not enough to fix this. Catherine's ultimatum had forced his hand. If William was now at risk of losing his marriage over this feud, then the stakes had officially become too high to ignore. Some insiders speculated that Charles had already attempted private discussions with both sons in an effort to encourage reconciliation. But the question remained, was either of them truly willing to listen? For William, the idea of forgiving Harry was not as simple as just moving past old wounds. He was the future king, and every decision he made was weighed against the long-term stability of the monarchy. Could he risk allowing Harry back into his life if he believed his brother would continue to expose private royal matters to the public? And what about Meghan? If Harry were to be welcomed back, did that mean welcoming her too? These were the questions that tormented him. For Harry, the situation was equally complex. While he had expressed love for his family, he had also made it clear that he did not regret leaving royal life behind. If William were to extend an olive branch, would Harry even accept it? Or had too much damage been done? Meanwhile, the public was watching closely to see how Charles would respond. His ability to manage this situation was now seen as a test of his leadership. A weak response would make him appear disconnected, unable to control the very institution he was meant to lead. A strong response, however, could set a new precedent for how family disputes were handled within the monarchy. Then there was the matter of public perception. The monarchy had always been about image, and right now, that image was suffering. The British public had largely moved on from the days of relentless royal drama, preferring to see the royal family as a symbol of continuity and stability. But with this feud continuing to dominate headlines, people were beginning to question whether the institution could survive in its current form. Some royal experts warned that if Charles did not intervene, the monarchy could face long-term consequences. This is not just a personal dispute, one historian explained in an interview. This is about the future of the monarchy itself. If William and Harry remain divided, it weakens the entire royal brand. The public needs to see unity, or they will start to lose faith in the institution. Others argued that Charles had more pressing matters to deal with. With political shifts happening across the Commonwealth, economic uncertainty in the UK, and ongoing debates about the relevance of the monarchy, the last thing he needed was to be dragged into a family dispute. But even the most pragmatic voices acknowledged that ignoring the issue completely was no longer an option. There was also speculation about how Queen Camilla fit into the equation. Unlike previous royal consorts, she had largely stayed out of family conflicts, choosing to focus on her role rather than involve herself in personal disputes. But as Charles's closest confidant, there were whispers that she had been advising him on how to handle the situation. Some believed she had encouraged him to remain neutral, while others suggested she was pushing for a reconciliation for the sake of the monarchy's stability. With tensions at an all-time high, the question now was whether Charles would take action before it was too late. Some palace insiders believed that he was considering calling a private family meeting, a last-ditch effort to bring William and Harry together under the same roof. Others thought he might address the issue in a more subtle way, perhaps through carefully crafted public statements designed to encourage unity without forcing it. Regardless of what path he chose, one thing was certain: Catherine's ultimatum had accelerated the timeline. This was no longer just about two brothers refusing to speak. This was now a crisis that had the potential to redefine the monarchy itself. And for King Charles, the time to act was running out. The public waited, the media speculated, and within the palace walls, decisions were being made that would shape the future of the royal family for years to come. Would the king step in? Would his intervention bring William and Harry back together? Or was this rift destined to be yet another chapter in the long, complicated history of royal family conflicts? Only time would tell. Prince William had never been one to make rash decisions. Every choice he made was carefully weighed, calculated, and considered through the lens of his duty, his family, and his future as king. But now, he faced a decision unlike any he had encountered before. It was not a matter of state, not a diplomatic challenge, not even a crisis that could be managed with the right public statement. This was deeply personal, and it was a decision that, no matter which way he turned, would have lasting consequences. For years, William had lived with the unresolved pain of his fractured relationship with Harry. The anger, the disappointment, and the sense of betrayal had hardened into something immovable. He had built walls around himself, believing that as long as he remained focused on his duties, the past would remain just that, the past. But Catherine's ultimatum had changed everything. It had forced him to acknowledge what he had spent so long avoiding. The truth was, this feud was not just about Harry anymore. It had bled into every part of his life, affecting his marriage, his children, and now, even the stability of the monarchy. He had convinced himself that cutting Harry out was necessary, that it was the only way to move forward. But now, for the first time, he was beginning to question whether that belief had cost him more than he realized. Sitting in his private study, away from the demands of royal engagements and media scrutiny, William found himself replaying every moment that had led to this point. He thought about their childhood, the way they had been inseparable, bound together by the tragedy of losing their mother. They had once been each other's greatest support, navigating the impossible pressures of royal life together. Where had it all gone wrong? The answer was complicated. It was not just one moment, not just one betrayal, but a series of events that had chipped away at their bond until nothing was left but silence and resentment. He had felt the first real shift when Harry introduced Meghan to the family. It was not that he did not want his brother to be happy, Of course he did. But from the very beginning, he had concerns. It was not about Meghan herself, but about the pace of their relationship, about how quickly things were moving. He had voiced those concerns, believing he was acting as any protective older brother would. But Harry had taken it as criticism, as interference, and the rift had begun. Then came the wedding, the media frenzy, the growing distance as Harry and Meghan began carving out their own path. William had tried to be patient, to understand, but the moment Harry and Meghan announced they were stepping back from royal duties without consulting the family, everything changed. It was not just the decision itself, it was the way it had been done, the blindsiding of the Queen, the fallout in the press, the feeling that Harry had chosen to walk away without a second thought. And then, the interviews. The revelations. The accusations. The claim that William was trapped within the monarchy. The suggestion that the institution had failed Meghan. The implication that William, by staying silent, was complicit in the very forces that had driven Harry away. William had never felt such betrayal before. He had remained silent, as he had been taught to do, refusing to air his own grievances. But the damage had been done. Now, years later, the wounds were still raw. And yet, despite it all, despite everything that had happened, Catherine had seen something he had refused to acknowledge. Beneath the anger, beneath the hurt, there was still a part of him that wanted his brother back. But was it possible? Could he truly forgive? Could he let go of the past? And even if he could, was reconciliation even what Harry wanted? That was the part that terrified him. What if he reached out and was met with indifference? What if Harry had moved on completely? What if he was the only one left holding on to the idea that they could ever be brothers again? And then there was the matter of the public. William was not just a man struggling with family issues. He was the future king. Every move he made was scrutinized, dissected, and turned into headlines. If he chose to reconcile, what message would that send? Would it be seen as weakness? Would it open the door for more public betrayals? And if he did nothing, would he be seen as cold, unyielding, unwilling to put family above pride? The weight of expectation bore down on him. His advisors had made it clear that whatever decision he made, it had to be carefully managed. There could be no spontaneous gestures, no reckless statements. If reconciliation was to happen, it would have to be handled with precision, with a clear strategy. But how could something so deeply personal be treated like a political maneuver? Catherine's words echoed in his mind. She had not asked him to forgive immediately, nor had she demanded that he repair things overnight. She had simply asked him to try. And for the first time, he realized that trying did not mean surrendering. It did not mean forgetting everything that had happened. It simply meant opening the door, just a little, to the possibility of something different. But how? What would that first step even look like? William considered writing a letter. It was formal enough to avoid immediate confrontation, but personal enough to convey sincerity. He could acknowledge the past, express his frustrations, but also extend the idea that perhaps, just perhaps, they could find a way forward. Then there was the option of a phone call. Direct, but risky. What if Harry refused to answer? What if the conversation turned into another argument? Would it be better to wait, to find the right moment? And what about a private meeting? A face-to-face conversation, away from the cameras, away from the public. It was the most honest option, but also the most intimidating. Could they even sit in a room together without years of resentment rising to the surface? As he weighed his options, he thought about his children. George, Charlotte, and Louis deserved to grow up in a family that was not defined by bitterness and silence. He thought about his father, who had spent decades caught in his own web of strained relationships. Was this the legacy he wanted to leave behind? And then, finally, he thought about Harry. Not the man who had walked away, not the brother who had hurt him, but the boy who had once been his closest friend, the boy who had laughed with him, who had stood beside him at their mother's funeral, who had once believed they would always have each other. Perhaps that boy was gone. Perhaps too much had changed. But perhaps, just perhaps, there was still something left to salvage. The dilemma remained. The choice was his. And whatever he decided, it would change everything. Would he choose anger? Or would he choose the possibility of something more? The future of his family, his marriage, and perhaps even the monarchy depended on that answer. And for the first time in years, William found himself unsure of what to do. No discussion about the rift between Prince William and Prince Harry could be complete without acknowledging the role of Meghan Markle. To some, she was a loving wife who stood by Harry's side as he broke free from an institution that had failed to protect him. To others, she was the catalyst for the division, the outsider who disrupted the delicate balance within the royal family. No matter where one stood, one fact remained clear: her presence in Harry's life had changed everything. From the moment Harry and Meghan's relationship became public, scrutiny followed. The British press dissected her every move, her every word, her every past relationship. Comparisons to Catherine were inevitable. Catherine had spent nearly a decade carefully adapting to royal life, slowly earning the public's trust. Meghan, on the other hand, had entered the royal sphere with the confidence of a woman who had already built a life outside the monarchy. She was successful, independent, and unwilling to mold herself into the traditional role of a royal wife. For William and Catherine, Meghan's arrival was not met with hostility, at least not at first. If anything, they had tried to welcome her. Catherine, in particular, had reportedly made an effort to help Meghan adjust, offering guidance on royal protocol, navigating the press, and understanding the unwritten rules of life within the palace. But from the start, it was clear that Meghan had her own ideas about what her role in the royal family should be. Tensions between Meghan and Catherine were subtle at first. Sources within the palace suggested that their personalities were simply too different. Catherine was reserved, calculated in her public persona, always careful not to overstep. Meghan was outspoken, eager to bring her own brand of activism into royal engagements, and uninterested in following the slow, traditional path that had defined Catherine's journey. While William and Harry had begun to drift apart, their wives' differences only made the gap wider. Then came the wedding drama. What had initially been dismissed as tabloid speculation later turned into one of the most infamous stories of the royal feud. Did Meghan make Catherine cry, or was it the other way around? The event in question reportedly took place in the days leading up to Harry and Meghan's wedding. Some accounts suggested that a disagreement over bridesmaid dresses had left Catherine in tears. But Meghan would later tell Oprah that the truth was the opposite. Catherine had made her cry. Regardless of which version was true, the fact that such a deeply personal incident was aired for the world to see only deepened the divide between the two couples. Meghan and Harry's decision to step back from royal duties only widened the rift. Meghan had spoken openly about the struggles she faced within the royal family, feeling isolated, unsupported, and even targeted by members of the institution. For Harry, this was more than just his wife's discomfort. It was a repeat of history. He saw echoes of what had happened to their mother, Princess Diana, and he refused to let it happen again. When the couple announced their decision to leave royal life behind, they framed it as a necessity, a means of protecting their mental health and their family's future. To William and Catherine, however, this was not just a personal decision. It was an abandonment. The monarchy was built on duty, on putting the institution above oneself. William had spent his entire life preparing for his future role, understanding that personal desires often had to be sacrificed for the greater good. Harry and Meghan's departure felt like a betrayal of that very principle. And when they aired their grievances in public, it was seen not just as an attack on the monarchy, but on the family itself. The Oprah interview was the breaking point. Meghan and Harry's claims, allegations of racism, of neglect, of a lack of support, shook the royal family to its core. For the first time, the monarchy was being publicly challenged in a way that it had never been before. William's response was uncharacteristically direct. When asked by a reporter if the royal family was racist, he responded with a firm, "We are very much not a racist family." It was a rare moment of public emotion from a man who had spent years perfecting the art of restraint. But behind closed doors, the damage had been done. Meghan had become the central figure in a battle that was no longer just about William and Harry. For Catherine, the situation was equally painful. The woman she had once tried to welcome had now become the symbol of everything that had gone wrong. The fallout had not only taken her husband's brother away from him, but it had also placed her in a position where she was being directly compared to Meghan in ways that were often unfair. Still, Catherine's approach remained different from William's. While William viewed the situation through the lens of betrayal and duty, Catherine saw it through the lens of family. She knew that Meghan's influence over Harry was strong, perhaps stronger than anything else. If there was ever going to be a chance at reconciliation, Meghan had to be part of the equation. But that presented a challenge. Would Meghan even be open to it? She had made it clear that she had no desire to return to royal life. She and Harry had built a new world in America, away from the constraints of the monarchy. Some believed that Meghan had no interest in repairing relations with the royal family, that she saw no benefit in reopening doors that had already been closed. Others speculated that she might be open to a reconciliation, but only on her terms. For William, this was a sticking point. If he were to reach out to Harry, it meant accepting Meghan as part of that process. Could he do that? Could he set aside everything that had been said, everything that had happened, for the sake of restoring his relationship with his brother? Or was that a line he was unwilling to cross? Catherine had already made her position clear. This was about more than just pride. If William wanted to move forward, he would have to confront not only his feelings toward Harry but also toward Meghan. That was a reality he could not escape. The royal family had faced many conflicts over the years, affairs, divorces, scandals. But never before had a modern royal marriage been at stake over a feud like this. Meghan was not just a distant factor in this equation. She was at the center of it. And whether William wanted to admit it or not, any path toward reconciliation would have to include her. Would he be willing to take that step? Or was the damage too deep, too raw, too irreversible? That was the question only he could answer. While much of the world's attention was on Catherine's ultimatum and William's response, there was one person at the center of it all whose voice had yet to be heard, Prince Harry. His name had been discussed in endless headlines, his past actions dissected, his words scrutinized. But what did this revelation truly mean for him? And more importantly, how did he feel about it? Harry had built a new life far from the constraints of the monarchy. His world was now in California, surrounded by people who understood him not as a prince, but as a man forging his own path. In many ways, it was the life he had always dreamed of, one where he was not bound by duty, where he was free to speak his mind, and where he had a sense of control over his own destiny. But no matter how much he tried to distance himself, the weight of his royal past always found a way to pull him back. He had expected backlash when he and Meghan stepped away from royal duties. He had braced himself for criticism, for the cold reception from his family. But what he had not anticipated was just how deep the divide would become. He had always assumed that time would soften the wounds, that eventually, even if they did not return to royal life, he and William would find their way back to each other. But years had passed, and the silence had only grown heavier. Then came Catherine's ultimatum. The news had reached him like a shockwave. It was one thing to know that William resented him, to believe that there was no path forward, but to hear that Catherine, his sister-in-law, a woman he had once considered an ally, was willing to put her marriage on the line over their fractured relationship, that was something he had not expected. It forced him to ask himself questions he had been avoiding. Had he been too harsh? Had his choices caused more pain than he had realized? And most importantly, was there still a chance to fix things? For years, he had justified his decisions by reminding himself of why he had left. The scrutiny, the mental toll, the feeling of being trapped within a system that never truly allowed him to be himself. He had felt abandoned by his family when Meghan faced attacks from the press, and their refusal to defend her had solidified his decision to walk away.